as we already know now, I am a therapist, but that's not really what defines me. But the way that we connected obviously was through this sort of personal brand Instagram page, ed.neeson. And the reason for that is that based on a lot of the work that I do is I guess the short way to say that is it's based on male self-improvement in the context of relationships. And the reason for that is I believe that the challenges that long-term relationships present to us really provide this optimal opportunity to bring out the best in us, particularly as men. And then there's lots of things to unpack with that.
Yeah.
But really, what started out as a personal transformation for myself as a man in a marriage, as a husband, evolved. And I was in a marriage and I was okay, but there was a lot of things that I was doing that were not okay, that nearly cost me my marriage potentially. So I, like a lot of people do, started working on self improvement, and what that evolved to was really a focus of improving myself as a man and in the context of relationships. And long story short, that translated into my work because I began to see men come in with those same problems.
Yeah.
The trick with that was, and I want to say this because I think this really might help explain my journey to how I've gotten here and maybe where I'm trying to go,
Yeah.
is that when it comes to an individual's personal work, you sort of have free range and a lot of autonomy of what you can do and what's okay, and it's all really what you declare that you think is good for you. Um, but in a therapy practice, I'm a licensed clinical therapist, and so I'm governed by ethics, an ethics
Yeah.
board, pretty much a licensure board, and so that automatically began to place some interesting and necessary limitations on how I could deliver the kind of information that had helped me personally to my clients who were seeing me under a clinical capacity, you might say. And so that really made me delve into a lot of science and research and
Mhm.
of all kinds of branches: biology, neuroscience, of course, psychology, philosophy, even mythology,
Okay.
behavioral economics. So there's all, and I say all those not because those details are too important here, but the fact that
The
there's a lot of
unconventional.
perspectives. Yeah, like there's a lot of perspectives that go into this work. And so I began to try to wrap my mind around this within sort of those limitations of ethical guidelines and what we call evidence-based research.
Yeah.
And that was, what do you might say, a little bit of serendipity there, because that really catapulted my understanding of what I do now in my work. And uh, not with just relationships, not just with helping men improve in the context of their relationships, um, but I guess more specifically, those masculine feminine dynamics. And I know you mentioned earlier,
Mm.
will be some talk today about masculinity.
Mm.
But that's sort of uh, I told you it's hard for me to be concise. So there you go.
No, this is
So,
interesting.
but I just feel like that journey is important because it's a story,
Yeah.
and what you will find in a lot of my work or themes of stories, and people really connect with that. And so
Yeah.
I don't shy away from um, telling that part of my story as a way to begin that connection right away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, Ed. Thanks for that. And it's interesting because you mentioned that you mentioned that you started the journey of personal development, and that was a way to improve your relationship, first of all. But secondly, you mentioned the word limitation when it comes to therapy because of the certain guidelines. And that's what, if I'm not mistaken, that's what led you into looking into those more evidence-based areas like the biology, the psychology, etc. Is that correct?
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, there, where I was getting my information was very unconventional, and some of that maybe even be a little controversial. And so I
Okay.
had to be really careful with a lot of that. And I think if you're into this stuff at all, you can probably read between the lines with some of that, but that's sort of irrelevant. Um, but I needed to bring, I needed to be able to support what I was bringing. And in my world, you have to support that. I say have
This
to is
is
probably
nice.
a strong. It's very wise to be able to support that with that evidence based practice.
Well, this is why I really enjoy talking to you, Ed, because obviously I'm a coach, and as an online coach, like just like just like you said, like you have that when you're working for yourself, you have that freedom of creativity with it, however you want to express your ideas, especially to your clients. So a lot of the things that I teach my clients are very unconventional as well. And I am a big fan and a massive student of Eastern philosophy. As you know, we've had discussions about that.
Hmm.
However, I feel like I don't need to be as careful. I am extremely careful, but I don't need to be as careful with expressing unconventional ideas without precise evidence, so to speak. And that has its dangers, which is why I'm very careful about it. I'm not sure that everybody is, but that's just the way that that's the way that I've been taught to think, having studied biology at university. It's just being a critical thinker. So I'm curious because your methods are unconventional, you mentioned. I mean, even talking about masculine and feminine dynamics, talking about mythology and stories, that is unconventional therapy from my perspective anyway. So what that suggests to me is that you bring in that element of personal development, of that man's journey, that hero's journey, plus a very analytical, logical approach to it, right?
Yeah, maybe to a fault, but yes, that's right. I'm
Okay.
laughing because I've never been told that I'm an over that I feel too much, that I'm too sensitive, but I couldn't tell you how many times in my life that I've been told that I think too much or that I overthink, and I think it's just because of that. So just when you said that, it was funny to me, so I just feel like I would bring that up, but yeah, maybe that's a story of it in and of itself.
I can say that. However, you overthink, and I'm doing quotation marks for everybody listening, you overthink about very important topics and you break it down beautifully. So, like I said, a lot of the lessons that I've learned from Eastern philosophy, from the likes of Buddha to Osho, even Eckhart Tolle, they're very profound teachings about life, about being present to the moment, about our purpose, etc. However, it's very they're written very simplistically and directly. Whereas when I read your work on Instagram, ed.nissen, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ed.nissen. I'll put the link in the description here anyway. You break down these ideas of purpose and masculinity and all these wonderful topics that men really grapple with, but you break it down in such a beautiful way, especially in stories.